Welcome to the Health Revolution, the program that shows you how to have a life of vibrant well-being. In a world full of noisy health trends, we bring you clarity. We reveal the science-backed strategies that truly work in a sea of fads. We explore the physical strength, emotional resilience, and mental mastery. These are the keys to an enriched life. Join us for inspiring interviews with champions who've conquered life's health challenges. Are you ready to unlock your potential to live with vitality and purpose? Then join the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands. Let's embark on this transformative quest. Together, we're about to change the game, starting now. The information provided in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Viewers should use their own discretion and consult with a healthcare professional for personalized guidance and recommendations. Welcome, everybody. You are watching the Health Revolution, and we are so glad that you are here joining us today. No matter which way you're tuning into us, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button. We want to stay connected to you. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, and I'm excited for today's episode because it's not only the physical strength that we conquer, but the emotional resilience and the mental mastery, the complexities behind optimizing our lives. One of those areas that we struggle with as a society, no matter where we are, is sleep. Today, we get to talk about how to master sleep, how the science behind sleep and what it takes to master it. We understand and we get that sleep is extremely important for us as human beings, but so many of us do struggle with it. And today we're going to talk about the solutions behind it and how we can utilize different angles to really conquer this and achieve new success with our health. Our guest today is someone who is a level expert in all of this. I'm excited for you and I to get to know him more. First, take a look at this. Meet Andrew Colsky, a renowned behavioral sleep medicine clinician and host of the international radio program Sleep Science Today on UK Health Radio. Trained at the prestigious University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine, Andrew specializes in treating insomnia, nightmares, and sleep device compliance issues. As the founder of National Sleep Center, he's dedicated to helping individuals reclaim their sleep. Combining his expertise as a mental health entrepreneur and lawyer, Andrew has also developed innovative technologies to enhance sleep medicine practices. Today, we'll explore how we can improve our sleep and well-being with Andrew's expert guidance. Andrew Colsky, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great, Adriana. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm excited about our conversation because this is such an important topic. And I've got to ask you right off the bat, what got you into studying and really diving into behavioral sleep and all that implies?
Great question. I get asked that question a lot, and I always have to think back to it. And the real answer is that, so I practice clinical mental health, okay? And in clinical mental health, you think about all the different types of mental health issues that people deal with, whether it's depression, anxiety, OCD, whatever it may be. But underlying mental health as well as physical health is sleep. And sleep has been sort of the redheaded stepchild, sort of off on the side, not really talked about a lot because we didn't know a lot about it. And as it's becoming more and more prevalent in the community, we're learning a lot more about it. And so it's a new area where you can have a lot of positive impacts with people and impact not only their mental health, but their physical health. So that's what got me interested in it. And that's why I practice it now.
How have you always mastered sleep? Did you ever have issues with it to where it began to fascinate you to really conquer it and then just share with others?
That's another question I get a lot. And the answer is, and I shared on some of my shows. So I actually have obstructive sleep apnea. And that's one of the common types of sleep issues that you hear about when you talk about sleep. The interesting thing is we always talk about, well, how do people know when they have apnea? Because they're asleep. They don't know that anything's going on, which is true. So there's a lot of things we talk about of how people find that out, but that's sort of my area. Now, outside of that, I happen to be a very, very busy person. I like to stay busy and doing a lot of things. So for me personally, once I get into bed and put my head down on the pillow, I'm pretty much going to be out. So I'm lucky from that standpoint.
Why do so many of us struggle with sleep? Why is this, in terms of humans, why is this such an issue today? Where do we begin to unpack this?
Yeah. So, if you think of the big picture, it all starts to make sense. So think back to caveman days, right? We didn't have any electricity, we didn't have any conveniences, we had nothing. And so people have what is called a circadian rhythm. And the circadian rhythm is basically kind of tied to sun up, sun down, right? As the sun goes down, it starts to get darker. We start to get tired. We go to bed. Sun starts to come up. We start to wake up. And it's not just the light, but it's actually inside of us. Our melatonin is changing the amount that's in us depending on the part of the cycle. So we naturally wake and sleep. Then, of course, we invented this wonderful thing called the light bulb. And the light bulb allowed us to stay up later because now we have light that we can see by. And then you add in the TV and the radio and the internet and all these conveniences that we've developed, and people have a very different schedule than their natural circadian rhythm. And so you put all these things together, and you can start to see how people's lives become fragmented, and sleep is different times on different days, and you got to wake up for a certain job when you normally want to be sleeping. So that's kind of the genesis of what I believe brings up a lot of the sleep problems, in addition to some medical problems like sleep apnea.
Now, with the medical concerns and the tie-ins, where did things become a much more growing concern that we've got some issues in society that we've got to address so that our health will improve? Where
Mm-hmm.
where did some of those concerns start to percolate?
So, like I said, sleep science is a relatively young field. And it's not until like the 1970s, sort of, that you start to see a bigger amount of research and recognition of what might be going on with sleep. And the more that the researchers, and we have some great researchers in the US as well as other parts of the world, but the more the researchers started doing research, the more they started to recognize how much sleep can impact things other than just, "Oh, I didn't feel good or I feel tired." It impacts our blood pressure. It impacts our heart. It impacts we talk today a lot about people being concerned about dementia. And sleep is one of the things that impacts dementia. If you're not getting good sleep, if you're struggling with sleep apnea, for example, or something else, the studies show that that can have a negative impact on your cognitive abilities as well as a lot of things. So it really kind of started in the 70s and then kind of got going. And now here we are in the 2020s, and sleep is starting to become that area that people recognize has some value.
Does it vary from one culture to the next, or from different parts of the world, or is it just something that we're all going through together, and it's just a huge societal quote unquote norm that we're dealing with right now, this epidemic?
Yeah, great question. And, part of it is obviously in most parts of the world have the same issues with lights and TVs and things that I talked about. But then there's also other cultural aspects. You think of some cultures may have a siesta that is part of their culture to rest in the day. And the different types of anxiety. So some cultures may be more high pressure type of thing, cultures. Others might be more low pressure. So all these different things are going to have an impact. But I think one of the biggest ones that I found out since doing this show is that in the UK, for example, it is common that if you go in to see your primary care physician, they are going to ask you about your sleep. It's part of what they check. In the US, it's very uncommon to be asked about your sleep. So different cultures value it differently.
And what are your findings that you find between the UK and us? What are you noticing the differences across the pond?
Well, so if you have that focus on early intervention, and you're able to then address those issues, it makes it better not only for sleep, but for your physical health, your mental health, all these things can be impacted in a positive way. Although it is interesting, in some of the European countries, while sleep is important, the number of practitioners, and you see that I do behavioral sleep medicine, that means that I focus on more of the insomnia and other behavioral issues. There's still a very small number of people who are trained and qualified to practice in that area. So we recognize there's a problem, but then we don't have people that can help fix it.
And that brings me to ask the behavioral sleep. So does that get triggered? Do some of the issues that come up get triggered by a medical condition that existed before? Or is it something independent on its own? Or like where do you see the connections, or where have you seen the connections in your studies?
Yeah, and the answer there is sort of all of the above. And what I mean by that is the two biggest things that you'll hear about when people start talking about sleep issues are probably going to be sleep apnea and insomnia. And now there's a third one that has been recognized, which is called COMISA, which stands for comorbid sleep apnea and insomnia, because a lot of people have both. So, the treatment is different depending on what the issue is. Sleep apnea is more of a medical type of a treatment because it deals with, if it's obstructive sleep apnea, you've got like an obstruction in your throat and your airway. Whereas insomnia is more of a behavioral type of issue, even though someone listening to this may say, well, that doesn't sound right. The science, when you get down to it, is it's a behavioral issue.
So let's talk about the insomnia piece. How early does it start where it becomes a growing concern as a trend? Is this something that happens maybe in young adulthood? Does it start earlier? What are some findings that you've noticed that are considered the origin, or contributes to the origin of insomnia?
Yes, yeah. So in order to answer that question, let me give you some definitions. So first, let's talk about acute insomnia versus chronic insomnia. Acute insomnia is everybody is going to have a night here and there where they just can't sleep well. And there's nothing wrong with it. That's expected. It just happens. Maybe you had a really anxious day, you had a car accident, or maybe your pet is sick, or whatever it may be, and it just gets you going and your mind is racing and you can't sleep. That's acute insomnia. Chronic insomnia then is broken down into three different types. If I can raise three fingers here. You've got those people who have trouble falling asleep, those who have trouble staying asleep, and those who have trouble waking too early. Some people can have one of those, some people can have two, some people can have three. And a lot of times you'll see it tied to the stages of life. So, one example would be typically when you're talking about people in their 70s, 80s, and above, they often will have trouble waking too early. And that's insomnia. Other people may have trouble falling asleep.
And so in the case of REM and or rapid eye movement and non-rapid eye movement, I've heard and I've heard conversations about how on average it can be it can last roughly 90 minutes or so, and that if we're going to, for example, if we have to have limited sleep for whatever reason, that it's good to have increments of 90 minutes or try to aim for that. How true is that, as I ask this of you? And what can you tell us about REM and non-REM and the importance behind it?
Sure. So let's again kind of define some things here. When you sleep, you've typically got three stages of sleep: N1, N2, N3, and then REM. N1 is sort of your light sleep where you're starting to kind of go to bed, but you're still kind of awake, that type of thing. N2 is the next level down. It's more deeper sleep. You're starting to kind of wind your body down into the deeper sleep. And then you get into N3, which is your deep sleep. That's where your restful sleep comes from. And at some points, you're going to go in and out of REM. So REM is going to be kind of shorter periods. But when you start looking at the age of the person, there's graphs and all that show. So as we get older, we start to go to bed earlier and wake earlier. But we also have different stages in terms of the amount of REM we will have and the amount of N1, N2, N3. So, in your 20s to 40s, you're going to have a nice balance in there. As you get into your 70s and 80s, you're going to have more of that N1, the lighter sleep, and you're going to have roughly the same amount of REM, but the stages kind of change. So if you look at a chart, it's really interesting. I don't have a chart to show you, but so it does change depending on your age, realistically.
What about your 50s and 60s?
So 50s and 60s are sort of the beginnings of that bigger change to move towards what I talked about in the 70s and 80s, but it's gradual. So like for myself, I'm right at that point. I'm 59, and I notice that I have started to go to bed a little bit earlier and wake a little bit earlier. Luckily, I don't have insomnia or anything, but there's definitely a change versus when you're a teenager. You're going to be sleeping naturally a lot later. When I was a teenager, I could probably easily sleep till noon, 1 o'clock without any problem. And this is a whole issue that comes up with school start times. When you really start getting into sleep, there's a whole debate about there. We're taking teenagers who are supposed to be sleeping at a certain time and forcing them to get up super early and go to school. And so now they're groggy, they're tired, they're not able to focus. And so it throws things off. But then you get into the realities of traffic, parents' work schedules, all these other things. And that's the other side of the argument. So the stages of life really have an impact on our sleep.
And I can totally relate because we have teenagers in the house for sure. So in the case of nightmares, what can you say about nightmares? Why do we have them? What's the significance behind it?
Yeah, another good question. So, we talk about dreaming, we talk about nightmares, and there's a lot of different theories and schools of thought. Nightmares can really take some of the, when we are not sleeping well, when we are stressed, when we have certain things on our mind can then take that and turn it into a nightmare. So it can take sort of the worst case scenario of things and kind of combine them and make this horrible, stressful type of feeling. The good news with the nightmare part is that there are treatments out there for nightmares. Primarily, it's called rescripting, where people work with a therapist to learn how to address the nightmares they have, how to rescript them into something different that then helps to sort of prime the mind so that when it comes time to be thinking about a nightmare, it's already got this rescripting that it can go to, which tends to alleviate the nightmare. The dreaming is also just sort of a deeper state that's happening in your REM cycle where you're processing things through the day. It may not make any sense, but it's just our mind doing all the processing that it does during sleep.
Is there a difference between nightmares and night terrors?
So night terrors would be someone who could wake up in the middle of the night just totally, stressed and distressed and, freaking out, and so that's different from a nightmare, which is more of a thought process that's going on. And there's even times when people talk about night terrors and things. I was reading an article a couple months ago that I found interesting, where there was this gentleman. I think he was in his 20s or 30s, asleep in his bed, and other people in the house, but he was in his own room. And the other people in the middle of the night hear this big crash, and they're like, "What is going on?" And they go and they look in on him in his room. What had happened was he had this dream or this night terror that he was on a football field and playing football. And for whatever reason, his brain had him get out of his bed, and he saw the dresser as a player on the other team. And so he went to block the dresser, slammed into it, and everything fell down and came apart. He had no idea at the time.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's quite a story. We've got more to cover. First, we're going to take a commercial break. Stay right there. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Hi everyone, welcome back to Fit Bites with Adriana. Today let's talk about simple stress reduction techniques to help you stay calm and balanced. Life can be very hectic at times, but there are easy ways to manage stress effectively. First, try deep breathing exercises. Inhale slowly through your nose, hold for a few seconds, and exhale through your mouth. Repeat this several times to calm your mind and your body. Another great technique is practicing yoga or stretching. Now, these activities not only reduce stress, but also improve flexibility and strength. Even just a few minutes a day can make a big difference. Taking a short walk, especially in nature, can help clear your mind and reduce anxiety. Physical activity releases endorphins, which are natural mood lifters. Don't forget the power of mindfulness. Spend a few minutes each day meditating or simply sitting quietly, focusing on the present moment. Now, this can help reduce stress and improve overall well-being. Remember, managing stress is essential for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Incorporate these simple techniques into your daily routine and feel the benefits. Stay tuned for more Fit Bites with Adriana. Welcome back to the Health Revolution. Today, we're talking about the science of sleep and how to master it. My guest today, Andrew Colsky, he's a behavioral sleep clinician, and we are really diving into this because how important sleep is to us as human beings. And Andrew, before the break, you were obviously making the connections of we talked about the difference between nightmares and night terrors. You told a very riveting story about how this can impact us as humans, as an example, and I'd like to get really granular with some of the deeper topics and how sleep can impact us. What is the tie between mental health and sleep disorders? Where do we begin with that and understanding that?
Mm-hmm. So, sleep is sort of an underlying piece of everything in our lives. And if we are not getting good sleep, not only is it impacting our physical health, meaning our blood pressure, our ability to relax, the stress levels on our body, the stress on our heart, just all the pieces of our body are being impacted physically. But mentally, there's been a lot of studies out that show that when people improve their sleep, they may have been dealing with anxiety. They may have been dealing with depression, maybe some other mental health disorders. And in some cases, not all, in some cases, that tends to go away when they improve their sleep. But improving your sleep is definitely going to have a positive impact in all regards, whether it be physical or mental. And that brings us to really one of the biggest issues that impacts a lot of people and a lot of things in both areas, which is insomnia. And I think it might be useful to talk a little bit about what goes on there, because that's one of the other big areas that people have a lot of questions about.
Why is it such a tough area to tackle in general? And I definitely want to dive into insomnia. How many people are struggling with it?
So I don't have the actual numbers in front of me of the number of people, but it is one of the largest issues when we talk about sleep. Remember before I said it's insomnia and sleep apnea. So if you talk to someone about sleep issues, pretty much one of the first things on their mind is going to be insomnia. And, why is it such a big issue? Well, my personal take on this, having, worked in this area now enough, is that insomnia, really a part of it deals with the fact that our sleep starts to get kind of fragmented, meaning the longer we're alive, the more experiences we have doing different things, staying up, going out to a nightclub, working late, having to get up early to go to school, having to get up early to get to work or take the kids to the bus or whatever. So all these different pressures and stressors start to impact us, but we have no choice but to go with them. So even though our body may be saying naturally, I want to be sleeping here and I want to get up there, we can't do that. So we start to do things that, in my opinion, starts to fragment our sleep. So we get some sleep when we can. We don't get enough sleep, but we got to be up. So with all these things over time, and then you add in the electric lights, and now with the new LED light bulbs, there's a lot that have a tremendous amount of blue light, which really impacts us. And so people start to get this fragmented sleep, and then insomnia, like I defined before, trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking too early starts to become, the norm. That's why I said before, it's a behavioral aspect of behavioral sleep medicine. And the treatment for insomnia, the gold standard from science, evidence-based studies, is something called CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And it is not like what you would think of when you hear about CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy. CBTI is very data-driven. And so real briefly, the way that it works and the way that you treat insomnia is you gather a lot of data through a sleep diary. The person marks down, this is what time I went to bed. This is how long it took me to fall asleep. This is when I woke up. This is how many times I woke up in the middle of the night and for how long, and all this data. And then looking at the data, you can start to see what might be going on with that person. And typically what you'll find is maybe the person was in their bed for 8 hours, but they actually slept for 5 of those 8 hours. So in CBTI, what you do is you start off with sleep restructuring, and you say, okay, we need to make sure that you start to reassociate your bed with sleep and sleep only, and stop doing all these other activities like watching TV, scrolling on your phone, reading books, doing the crossword, whatever it may be. And so you restrict them, or I like to say recalibrate their sleep so that they are in bed for 5 hours, because that's what they're sleeping, 5.5 hours, 6 hours, whatever it may be that they're actually sleeping. And then they're out of bed all the rest of the time. And initially they find this to be a big shock because it's like they're not used to it. They're very uncomfortable. They'll get groggy. It gets worse before it gets better. That's what I tell all of them. But the idea is you're reassociating the bed with sleep and sleep only. And as they start to get used to that, they start to become more comfortable so that the time they're actually in the bed, they're actually sleeping consistently. And then you slowly start to expand their sleep window. So maybe they started at 5.5 hours. Now they're 5 hours and 45 minutes. Now they're 6 hours. Now they're 6:15. And it's retraining, because any sort of behavioral modification is repetition of the same thing over time until it becomes the norm again. And so you're recalibrating their whole sleep, processes, so that at the end of therapy, they get into bed, they fall asleep, they stay asleep, and they wake up at the time allotted. So that's the real brief explanation of CBTI and how we treat insomnia.
Has this been in a recent development? Has this been around for a time, or is this more of a newer approach to addressing insomnia?
Yeah. So remembering that sleep medicine itself is relatively new. CBTI is relatively new, but it's been around for quite some time, but there's not enough practitioners who practice it. So it's hard for people to get it. And what ends up happening, and this is the realities, and I'm sure plenty of your listeners probably experience this themselves, is they may go to their primary care physician, or they may even go to a sleep doctor, and they say, hey, I've got this problem. I'm not sleeping well. And they'll come out with a prescription for a sleeping pill. And then they start taking the sleeping pill. And for some of them, it knocks them out and they feel like they're sleeping. For others, there's different issues. But it's not uncommon, especially if you look at the prescriptions, especially that elderly people are taking. They're all taking a sleep drug or more than one. And the challenge is long-term use of those is not really good for your system. But the other part is there's no sleep drug out there that actually gives you restful sleep. The best they can do is kind of knock you out and give you the illusion of sleep. So, CBTI started to come about as an actual way to truly address the underlying cause of insomnia and recalibrate so that there's no need for any medications. And the real dirty secret that a lot of people don't want to hear, they don't want to believe, is that the sleep meds really don't do anything, even though they do something when you take them. Big picture, they don't do anything, meaning that if you look at the studies, there was one study out there where they took people who had been on sleep medications for a really long time, and they started to slowly tweak the medication so that it was a little bit of placebo and a little less med, a little more placebo, a little less med, down to total placebo. And the patients didn't know it, and they didn't have any impact. Other people, they've studied just placebos. They thought it was a sleeping medication, and they showed that this is really, the way you're perceiving it more so than an impact. Now, sleep meds do have an impact, but long-term, when they studied sleep meds versus CBTI has always come out as the gold standard because it addresses the core problem.
And how much sleep should we be getting? I know that that can be debatable. That's been debatable before. Bare minimum, average. What does that look like? And does that change over time as we get older?
It does change over time, and it's a good question. So the amount of sleep that we get fluctuates depending on our age. And basically, you've got newborns, so 0 to 3 months, they're going to be looking at 14 to 17 hours of sleep a day. So obviously, that's different from someone like you and I, right? Then you move into your infants, 4 to 11 months. They get a little bit less, 12 to 15 hours a day. Toddlers, 1 to 2 years, 11 to 14. So you see how it keeps getting less and less. 3 to 5 years, 10 to 13, 6 to 13 years, 9 to 11. And then your teenagers are going to get 8 to 10 hours a day. And you, as you know, the mother of teens, it shifts a little bit. So they sleep later, but it's still 8 to 10 hours. Then we start to become an adult at 18. And so from 18 to 25, now we're in that 7 to 9 hour range, which is what we typically hear about, this 8-hour range. And we stay that way until we get sort of into our 70s. And then we might need a little bit less. Now, that's the averages. There's some people who only need 6 hours. There's some people who need the 9 hours. So the 8-hour is a number that we hear a lot, but it's not like if you're only getting 7 hours and you're rested, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't have to have 8 hours. And, I think it begs mentioning one other thing here, which is all the trackers that we wear these days, the Fitbits and the Apple Watches and all that. And they give a sleep score. There's this actual thing called orthosomnia, which is its own sleep disorder, which is people who become so anxious that they didn't get 100% sleep score that now they get insomnia because they're not sleeping perfectly, and it feeds on itself. So when we're treating people, we tell them, take it off, don't wear that thing because it's not helping you. And every single manufacturer calculates their sleep score differently. They don't even share their formula with the sleep community. So we don't know what it is that they're measuring because they keep it proprietary. So sleep scores are nice and they can be a guide, but that's about as far as they should go.
And I would say I can see how that being a guide and that there's a standard deviation of like what truly the accurate numbers would look like versus what they're displaying. And truth be told, one time I did get 100%. I was thrilled. It was a great day that's only one time that I've ever gotten it. But it also, I can't help but want to ask you, what about in the case of, say, as we get older, both men and women, there are some hormonal changes that are happening. Obviously, the women, I'll just state the obvious, the white elephant in the room becomes a woolly mammoth in the name of perimenopause and menopause. And so you've got some hormonal changes, but men go through it too. And so what does that look like? How does that play a role in where sleep needs to be? And what are some of the findings that you found or that you've come across with hormonal changes and then sleep and sleep needs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a very valid question because there are changes. But the interesting thing is that while there are changes, they're not huge changes, but they are significant changes. And what I mean by that is this: a lot of the people who will call me looking for help with their sleep would be women postmenopausal. They first start to experience that, well, yeah, I've kind of had these insomnia issues, but they're really kind of more pronounced now. And they may even discover at that age that they might have sleep apnea. Now, again, that they're not overweight. They don't meet the standard picture of what we think of when we think of someone with sleep apnea. But they start to find out because maybe their bed partner says, you're not breathing at night or something. You really ought to get that checked. And they get a sleep study and they find out, typically what I hear is they have more of a mild sleep apnea, but everybody's going to be different. So postmenopausal, typically what I hear of is more awareness and more prevalence of insomnia and sort of that first discovery of sleep apnea. Now, they can be treated. There's nothing that's making the person harder to treat or anything, but it does start to show more.
So let's talk about sleep apnea and what is the definition of it and what are you noticing the trends behind it?
Mm-hmm. So, you can open up a whole cornucopia of things with sleep apnea here.
Let's go.
But basically, what is sleep apnea? So there's two types of sleep apnea. You have your obstructive sleep apnea and your central sleep apnea. Central sleep apnea is more of something that your brain is doing in terms of apnea means that I'm not getting a breath. So even though I may try to breathe in, there's something that's stopping me, or in central cases, I'm not even breathing in. I'm just not breathing for a little bit. Obviously, I'm breathing, but I have these breaks. The most common is obstructive sleep apnea. And what that is that people in their throat, picture laying down on your back and your tongue kind of falls back into your throat, and then your throat muscles are not really strong, so it kind of collapses a little bit. So your airway gets really collapsed. So when you try to breathe in, you can't breathe in because it's blocked. And so people will be sleeping, not realizing this is happening. It's common that they also snore, although they don't have to. And their bed partner will hear them go, and then they just stop and they hear nothing. And it can go for 15 seconds. It can go for 2 minutes. And then eventually they're like, because their body has to get this air. So their body wakes up to get this air, because if they don't have it, they're going to die because they're not getting oxygen in. And they catch their breath and then they fall asleep again, and then it repeats. So the way they measure it is called the apnea-hypopnea index. And strange words, but basically apnea means a time when I'm not breathing. Hypopnea is sort of half of that. I'm struggling. and they measure it by the number of times that occurs within an hour. Well, that's another whole Pandora's box, because you may have an apnea that lasts 15 seconds. I may have one that lasts a minute and 15 seconds. We both had one apnea. So the severity, so there's a lot of debate about the measurement and whatever. But at the end of the day, the point is you need to make sure the person has an open airway in their breathing so that we don't have that high blood pressure, the pressure on the heart, all the things we talked about before. And the way we do that typically is through a CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure. You can wear a mask over your nose and mouth, just in your nose, but we use that. And then there's other ways if that doesn't work for you.
And I definitely want to continue this conversation. We're going to take a commercial break. Stay right there. We're coming back. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Thank you so much for watching The Health Revolution. Our show is growing, and it's all thanks to viewers like you. No matter how you found us, please hit the subscribe button so we can stay connected and continue to deliver amazing content to you.
Introducing Launchpad, the perfect partner to help you launch your dream project to the world. We know that time is of the essence, and we're here to help you make the most of it. With Launchpad, you'll get access to the most advanced digital tools and strategies to take your idea from a mere concept to a fully fledged success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, we have everything you need to make your mark in the world. Launchpad, your ultimate launch partner.
We can take our own health into our own hands. Okay, so we'll kind of expand on that. So I take a lot of vitamins every day. Long before I started this business, my wife has had me taking my vitamin C, my B complexes, amino acids every single solitary day, and I still do, even though I still do IVs as well. But when you take vitamins orally, you get 15 to 20% of them. Some people get less because they have autoimmune issues. Some people have a lot of inflammation issues, whatever the case may be, so they don't get the absorption that they need to be getting. So they don't get their immune system built up. Doing the mobile IVs, I'm able to take your immune system, I'm able to naturally boost it.
Welcome back to The Health Revolution. We're talking the science of sleep. Our guest today, Andrew Colsky, he is a behavioral sleep clinician. And before the break, we started diving into sleep apnea and just going over different components of some of the sleep issues that we are having as a society. And Andrew, what are some key components that people can do today to start sleeping better immediately? What are some things that are best practices that we can do to change things?
Yeah, there's definite things people can do. So let me share something about sleep apnea, and then I'll share something about insomnia. So the first thing about sleep apnea, obviously, is it's important to find out if you have it. Now, the easiest way is if you have a bed partner who says to you, wow, you're really snoring loudly and you're gasping for air. Well, that's a clue that you may want to get checked out and see if you have sleep apnea. But then suppose you're someone who sleeps by yourself. How are you supposed to know? Because you're asleep, right? So you don't know. So here's some tips. I get this from Carissa Hankins. I credit her. She also practices sleep medicine. And she has a self-assessment that I think is a really cool thing for people to do. And all you need is your cell phone. So here's what you do. You take 3 selfies. The first selfie you take is with your face forward and mouth closed. Just like that. You're just looking at the camera. The second selfie is with your face forward and your mouth open so you can see into your mouth. And the third selfie is a profile selfie. And what you do after you've taken those 3 pictures is, number 1, when you're looking at the first one, you're going to be looking at your eyes. And the question is, do you find you have saggy eyelids? If you have saggy eyelids, that's a potential sign that you might have something going on with apnea. The second one is your nose. Some people have a more bulbous nose. Sometimes it's even red. If you picture someone who drinks a lot of alcohol, you'll see that a lot. that's another potential sign of apnea. So the droopy eyelids, the bulbous nose, maybe even red. The third one is your jawline. If you have a smaller jaw or a recessed jawline, that's something else that may be a sign for apnea. So those are things you're going to look at for that first picture. The second picture with your mouth open, if you look inside your mouth when your mouth is open, some people will have a very spacious mouth, meaning you can look through, you can see their throat, the uvula, the little thing that kind of hangs down in the back of your throat, and that's a big open airway. Other people may have a smaller crowded mouth so that when you look in, all you see is the tongue. You can't see behind the tongue in there. So they probably have more of an obstruction because the tongue is blocking that way. So that's the thing that you're looking for with the mouth open picture. And the profile picture is where you're looking at your neck. So people who tend to have a thicker neck at the upper part, not the lower part of the neck, but the upper part of the neck, men 17 inches or more, women typically 16 inches or more, that's also a sign that you may have apnea. So even if you're by yourself, you can do that selfie assessment and you can figure out whether or not you think you need to be checked. So that's apnea. Then there's tips for insomnia. And these are relatively easy things to do. And we call it sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is all about the fact that, number one, we sleep best when our room is dark. So room darkening shades and all those clocks and electronics and everything with those little tiny LED lights that tend to light up the room, even though they're that tiny, get rid of them, put black tape over them, do something to cover up all that unnecessary light. So you want to have a dark environment. Number two, you want a cool environment. So if you have a heavy down comforter or something, you're sweating and you don't have any air movement in the room and it's uncomfortable, you need to change that. Change the sheets, change your air conditioning, change your fan, whatever it is that you need to do to kind of keep it a cool environment. Going to bed and waking up at the same time each day, a consistent sleep schedule is important because remember, we're talking about a behavior here. So the more you do the same behavior, the better it gets. Avoiding bright light in the middle of the night. If you get up to use the bathroom or something like that, yeah, you're going to have some light. You don't want to trip and fall, but you don't need that harsh LED blue light. I encourage people to get the more yellowish, calmer tones. Same price, same thing. You just choose which one you want. So, stay towards the yellow orange type of light. Then eating regular meals, exercising, which I'm sure Adriana has taught many of you good exercise, as well as eating tips. Avoiding alcohol in the evening. This thing about, I just have a glass of wine to wind down. That's actually not helping you. That's hurting you. You need to learn to do this naturally. Caffeine, obviously. By midday, I tell people stop your caffeine, sodas, coffees, teas, anything with caffeine in it. Smoking, nicotine is a stimulant, so you don't want to be smoking especially as it gets closer to bedtime, because it'll keep you up. And then the biggest thing that I tell everybody is, if you're in bed and you are not sleeping, get out of bed. Do not. The last thing you want to do not lay there and try to sleep. I have yet to figure out what that means. Try to sleep. I'm not sure what you do when you try to sleep, but whatever it is that you do, don't do it. So if you want to be on your phone, if you want to watch TV, if you want to, do anything else, get out of bed and do it. The only thing that you should be doing in bed is, we call it sleep or sex, period. That's it. Other than that, if you're laying there tossing and turning, get out of bed.
These are great. We're going to take a quick break. Stay right there. We're coming right back.
Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Welcome back to the Health Revolution.
Today, we're talking about the science of sleep. Our guest today, Andrew Colsky. We've been covering so many important pieces of information. I do want to hold space. I know we're starting to run out of time, but Andrew, I want to talk about your book and let's see if you can talk a little bit about it. Why can't I sleep well? I know you're now an author. Can you give a little light to your book and when we can expect it?
Sure. Thank you. So this is a book that I wrote that is basically, it's 150 common sleep questions and answers. And not only is it the answers, but I believe very heavily in evidence-based information. So all the citations of all the studies that lead to those answers are there in the book. So you can look up the actual study if you want to. And the reason I did it is because I don't think there's enough legitimate evidence-based information out there. There's a lot of, well, I think this and I feel that, but that doesn't cure sleep problems. Evidence-based scientific methods do. So the purpose of the book was to educate people about legitimate evidence-based information. The book should be out on Amazon. My goal is for October of 2024 this year. It's already written. We've already done most of the editing. We're just cleaning up around the edges now. So it should be out probably in October.
Can't wait for that. And where can we find you in the virtual space?
So I'm in a couple different places. The easiest place to find me is simply go to sleepsciencetoday.com. And if you go there, you'll find links to my podcast. You'll find links to my YouTube channel. There's a blog there. You can sign up to be on our mailing list where you'll get a free ebook when you sign up. And we'll make you aware of special opportunities that we have, maybe some special chats and special guests. So everything really, just go to that one spot, sleepsciencetoday.com, and you'll find what you need to find.
Andrew, this has been incredible. Where else can we find you in 2024 going into 2025? Will you be lending your voice in different areas? What does that look like as you're wrapping up the year and starting the next?
Sure. Yeah. So like I said, I believe heavily in educating people about the evidence related to things. So in November, for example, I happen to be in the state of Virginia. So in November, I'll be speaking about sleep at the Virginia Counselors Association National Conference. And let's see, actually tomorrow morning, I'm going to be going to attend a sleep conference. I attend a lot of those as well because there's so much information to learn. But throughout the rest of the year, that is the speaking engagement that I have coming up. And then I'm working to try and do more things online through YouTube and other social media so that people all around the world will have access to it. And I find that you can get a bigger message out to a bigger audience there at their own convenience. So if you just stay on that, sleepsciencetoday.com, you'll be able to keep up with all the things that I'm doing.
So obviously it's clear that you're going to continue to lend your voice and have that speaker role and speak about this. And clearly you are versed in all things sleep. And Andrew Colsky, thank you so much for your time and energy and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and the ability to share this information with your audience.
Absolutely. And for everyone who is watching, of course, you can find us on the web. Our website is thehealthrevolutiontv.com. You can certainly subscribe to our newsletter. You can email us with any show episode ideas that you might have. Upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll find our QR code. If it's easier as a crow flies to grab that, please feel free to do so. And then as always, every single week, as a reminder, you can find us on E360 TV, the Achieve TV channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern every week. That is all the time that we have. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We will see you soon.